Welcome, everybody, to Indivisible Text Ledge Live. It is Saturday, April 11th, and Jason and I are here to talk to you about the 87th legislature, which we have to be honest with you. Jason, it's feeling like a rough one, isn't it?
Yep, we're holding on to our 8 seconds here.
Yeah, good Texas metaphor there. So we are working really hard to make sure that Texans are taking action because we're in the critical part of the legislative session. We have the next couple of weeks as bills continue to move through the process. Really, what happens is up to March 12th, legislators can file bills. And after March 12th, we see a huge ramp up of committees starting to hear those bills and getting public testimony and having votes to vote them out of committee. And when a bill gets voted out of committee, it then needs to go to that full chamber. So if it gets out of a Senate committee, it goes to the Senate floor. If it gets out of a House committee, it goes to the House floor. And right now, every day, pretty much several times throughout the week, the entire chambers, whether the full Senate or the House floor or the full House, are voting on these bills so that they can continue to then go to the other chamber. And so we're at that stage of the process where these bills are starting to get voted on, the full Senate, the full House, moving to the other chamber. And we're getting to the end of potentially stopping some of these bills that are horrible and also moving good bills forward so that it gets to the governor's desk so that he can sign them come June. And so these next couple of weeks are very critical for every Texan. So before we jump into the news with Jason, we have a bunch of highlights from all of the great content that's being shared and created from various partner organizations, news outlets like Texas Tribune. I want to share our call to action page with you. And this is our indivisible.textledge.org website. So if you go to indivisible.textledge.org, it's linked in our post. And if you go to calls to action, this is where you'll see our most recent actions and all of the actions that we're asking Texans to take. If you want to look for all of the education actions, you can click on the education link here, or you can click on reproductive rights if you want to get all the reproductive actions, and you can get the information on what needs to be done. And so you simply click on the link, get the issue information, call or email. There's a script, there's the contact information, and there's more information for you to learn so that you can take action. And this is so critical because we need Texans taking action every day. And so this can take you 5 to 10 minutes out of your day if you're doing one action per day. If you can commit to that, that is huge. And then if you want to let us know you took action, we have our CTA tracker that you can fill out and let us know that you took action. And that just helps us be able to monitor and see how much pushback we're giving on these different areas. And so please, if you're out there, you're watching this, and if you're wanting to figure out how we can stop some of this bad legislation or push forward good legislation, take action. That's the message that we can give to you, and we're trying to give to you every day. With that, Jason, there's a lot of news. There's a lot of things to take action on. Let's dive into see what's been happening around the ledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are really starting to heat up in the Ledge world right now because of what Alex was saying. Like, we're seeing the first bills get hitting the full floor of the Senate and the House, and it's probably going to pick up steam for a bit here between now and the end of session, which is really only about 7 weeks away at this point. So it's gonna keep going. We wanted to start today highlighting this bill SB 29. So in the Senate, where really the Senate, at least in this session, is the seat of the culture wars in Texas. Little Governor Dan Patrick really is pushing that, as he always does. And SB 29 specifically is barring high school trans athletes from competing in with the gender they identify as. So it's pretty destructive to like single out these students and force them into roles that don't fit for them. And and yet this has become an issue. I really across the nation. There've been these bills in Republican legislatures all across the country, but it's there. So give your folks a call and tell them to oppose this, please. And it is potentially going to be hitting the docket next week.
Yeah, horrible bill that needs to be stopped, and there's just so many things that we need Texans to do, contacting their senators. But if they can show up at the Capitol, that would be an amazing step as well. We understand that people want to, prioritize safety. We want everyone to prioritize safety, but we also know a lot more Texans are getting vaccinated, and we know that if you are vaccinated and you've been able to get all of the shots, if you had the 2 shots or just the 1 shot, that from depending on what kind you got, then try to make it to the Capitol, because this is huge. This bill is an example of so many other bills. And you can go to our website and search for SB 29. We've got a lot of great content around this bill, the impacts it has. And so definitely check that out on our website.
Yep, absolutely. And I did also just want to highlight this call to action from this great organization, Texas Rising, that is, so SB 29 isn't the only anti-trans bill out there. There's 6 of them that are coming up, and they have a link here to give testimony and ask that they not be passed. So we encourage you to go and take our calls to action, and also just take a few minutes and do your testimony here. Shifting focus slightly, we also just wanted to highlight, again, in the culture war department, there are 50 bills, almost 50 bills filed this year seeking to limit abortion rights in Texas. This includes a abortion ban starting at 6 weeks, which would be, I mean, who knows they're pregnant at 6 weeks, right? It'd be effectively outlawing abortion, and would be unconstitutional according to all rulings up to this point. So again, we just want to highlight that we've got a number of calls to action in our reproductive rights huddle that will point you to specifics about these bills and what you can do for them.
And this is a great time to kind of just remind everyone out there, this is how the Lege works. We have 140 days for our legislature to pass a 2-year budget, to pass new legislation. Happens every 2 years. And the reason it's crammed in, and like I talked about earlier, the March 12th deadline to file bills leaves us really only for a few months to be able to get hearings, to get all this stuff. The reason it feels so much pressure and there's so much anxiety and there's so much things that are happening, it's by design.
Yeah.
And so you hear a lot about the anti-trans bills that are happening, or the voter suppression bills, which we're going to get into a little bit later. And then you have reproductive rights here. It's all by design to overwhelm us so that we don't engage, and so that they are able to pass these kind of things. And when we talk to our reproductive rights huddle leader, Cheryl Foster, who is completely connected with a whole host of allies around the various bills and the work that's being done to try to stop them. This is a dire moment for Texas right now, unfortunately, that if we don't have real resistance and if we don't really start ramping up our voices against this legislation, that they are effectively making abortion all, pretty much illegal in Texas. And the way they have some of this legislation designed, it's so that it will hold up against any litigation against it if it goes up to the Supreme Court. And now with the Supreme Court being where it's at, with all of the changes from the Trump administration in that space, a lot of people feel like there is a real pathway to make abortion illegal in America. And our first opportunity to stop this is to make sure it doesn't get out of the state Texas legislature.
Yep.
So ramping up our voices around this is hugely, hugely important. Like, we really don't have that much time to really try to stop this, but we do have some time. And so if you haven't taken action on this, take action right away. regarding these abortion bills that are trying to make it illegal.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, Alex, this is Texas is kind of one of the ground zeros nationwide for this stuff. And this is all meant to be a test of this new Supreme Court that we've got. But the more opposition we can provide at this point, the more, the less clear that path is for the other side. Shifting a little bit, this is probably our largest focus right now. We have these dual Senate and House bills that are massively restricting voting rights. HB 6 in the House, SB 7 in the Senate. HB 6 got voted out of committee this past week, so it will be up to hit the Texas floor soon. Of course, this is the one that was written by Texas's worst legislator, Briscoe Cain, who's also chair of this committee through some terrible deal with the devil. And there was all kinds of hiccups with the hearings, and then the details of this bill are, I mean, just like this, right? It would make it a state jail felony for local election officials to distribute an application to vote by mail to a voter who didn't request one. So if you don't request a application to vote by mail, they can't send you one, and if they do, it's a felony for them. Now, how that improves election integrity or whatever catchphrase they're using is beyond me. But this bill is filled with this kind of restrictive stuff that's designed to really keep as many people as possible out of the ballot box, as many of the wrong people as possible out of the ballot box, right?
And like one of the clear violations, it feels like, in trying to implement something like this is when you have Texans who are over 65 who automatically qualify for a mail-in ballot. Why wouldn't the county go ahead and send them that information so that they have it? They automatically qualify. There is nothing that they have to do in order or to prove or whatever. The state has it to where they can get one if they want one. So why not make that easy for some of our more vulnerable people in our community, which is our older population? Let's make voting easy for them. And a lot of people try to really try to defend these House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7 in a very partisan way, and they try to defend it in saying, oh well, it's because Republicans care about election integrity, which this is not what this is, or Democrats are wanting to find ways to change Texas and they're trying to use this. This is not about partisan politics, whatever. This is about democracy. This is about having over 20 million eligible Texans being able to vote, and our record so far in our recent history is 11.3 million. We have over 9 million Texans we still have to engage, empower, and connect so that they can vote. And by restricting voting access and using tactics like this, scare tactics, so that people feel threatened to vote or feel threatened to participate in voting, we are limiting the amount of Texans that are voting, and that hurts democracy. And so this is going to hurt people who traditionally vote Republican or Democrat or Independent. This hurts every Texan, and it hurts our democracy. This is why this is so horrible.
Access to the ballot box should not be a partisan issue, but it is right now. And along those lines, I thought this was a really telling data point about this. These bills that last March, Houston voters, specifically voters at a historically Black college in Houston, had to wait 5+ hours to vote after 7 p.m. So that means the last of them voted midnight, 1 a.m., somewhere thereabouts. And of course, last November, Harris County implemented 24-hour voting in order to make it more accessible to people, give people an opportunity to go to the polls at a time when it wasn't crowded because of COVID. And as Alexa highlights here, one of those has driven the Texas Lege to implement it or to propose restrictions that are going to get rid of the 24-hour voting. Again, why is that a thing? What's wrong with polls being open 24 hours? I mean, what happens to people who work night shift and whatever? But that's part of these SB 7 and HB 6 proposed legislation. And you kind of are seeing the kind of racial differential in the effects of these bills that she was highlighting here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, the goal of the impact of this is unfortunately to impact our Black and brown communities as much as possible. But once again, having 24-hour voting, having more early voting days helps every Texan.
Yep.
And so the consequences of them doing this is not going to just be for Black and brown communities.
Yep.
While it is going to try to impact them the most, it's going to impact all of us. It's going to impact every Texan, not only people in certain communities. And this is why this is so horrendous. But the motivation, like what Alexa, highlights here, is definitely motivation against a certain community is what they're trying to do. But they're going so far with their voter suppression that it's going to hurt us across the board.
Yeah. I've been happy to see some even GOP county chairs and whatnot pushing back on some of this. Another one of the proposals in these bills is that they have to distribute voting machines evenly across districts, regardless of population, right? And there've been some GOP county chairs pushing back against that, saying this makes no sense. Why wouldn't we put the voting machines where the most people vote? So I thought that really highlighted the way that their paint is very broad brush, and it's really going to have a huge impact on everybody.
And one of those areas of pushback, like you're saying, Jason, is from Tarrant County's Judge Whitley, who is pushing back on some of this, the impacts of this legislation. And Tarrant County is the most populous county in Texas that still has a lot of Republican legislators, a lot of Republican, mayors and things like that. They view it as still a Republican stronghold. And so this is a GOP county commissioner saying, we need to see what the impacts are going to be here. It doesn't make sense. And so to your point, this, when it's on the ground, when it's people who are actually implementing the work, they see the fallacy in this legislation and the problems that's gonna happen.
Yep. And I just I thought this was apropos of this whole debate. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has been insisting that the SB 7 and the Senate doesn't change early voting rules at all, and that got rated as a big old pants on fire from PolitiFact. That there's lots of quite clear changes to early voting rules in the bill.
Yeah, and our lieutenant governor, or as certain members of our media refer him as the little governor.
That's right.
Patrick had a press conference and try to have his tough man voice on, talking to the press about this, but just blatantly lies, just flat out lies to people. And this is a tactic that he is more than comfortable using. Instead of serving Texans, that helps us move forward with progress and implementing the solutions we need for the 21st century, and all in a whole host of ways throughout our state. He would rather focus on the things that he's interested in, that helps the people that are close to him, that helps him keep in power, and just completely lie to Texans. And it's to me, it's more than misinformation. It's just completely lying, not telling the truth, and thinking so little of Texans that we're not going to know a lie when we see it. And
Yep.
it's so unfortunate when people don't just completely call him out and what we hope vote him out come
Yep.
2022.
Yep. Yeah, and all of this is based on the big lie, right? That the 2020 election was somehow stolen from Trump because of widespread voter fraud, which has been zero evidence, even though little Governor Dan Patrick has been a quite prominent promoter of that idea, and is using it as the driver behind this bill. I thought I loved this thread. Emily Ebby, who's I think with the Texas Civil Rights Project, she has a great thread where she's going through and highlighting all the specific places in SB 7 where that are effectively voter suppression. And so we have the restriction on 24-hour voting, the vote by mail gag rule, free reign of poll watchers. We haven't mentioned this a lot, but part of this bill, it gives poll workers, regardless of their political affiliation or whatever, much vaster powers to challenge the right of voters to vote there, including being able to film voters as they're voting, and a whole host of other things. But I think it's just great to have it broken down in such concrete ways, going through the actual text of the bill and saying, here it is, and here's what's happening. We mentioned this, right? The new formula for polling places in terms of how many they have to be and where they're highlighted, but really focusing on counties with lots of BIPOC. And drive-through voting was another innovation that Harris County had. Anyway, it goes on. Another one we haven't mentioned so much is VDRs are voter deputy registrars face new scrutiny in this bill, and the possibility of really getting in trouble if they mess up something or don't get the rules just right or whatever. Anyway.
Which people do in a volunteer role.
Yep.
Texans throughout the state volunteer to become voter registrars to help fellow Texans have access to the ballot box, to be able to vote. This is a civic duty that people are taking upon themselves to help democracy in Texas. And the state legislature's perspective on them is to say, well, let's make them fear doing this. So either one, they don't do it, or two, we can stop them from doing it. Because the last thing we need from their perspective is volunteers helping democracy.
Yeah.
And that's just what's so crazy about all of this. And if you've heard a lot about this voter registration laws, HB 6, SB 7, but you haven't seen Emily's thread on Twitter, like, I highly encourage you. Jason and I are highly encouraging you. This is the go-to thread. If there's anybody in your life who is trying to argue that this legislation is okay or that there's nothing wrong with it, this is the thread. This is one of the key pieces that you can use to help spread real information and the truth behind this horrendous legislation.
Yep. And one last, or a couple of last things to highlight about this. We're spending a lot of time on this because it's a big deal, right? This is probably the biggest issue facing us right now. This was a really interesting report, I thought, that came out that if these voter suppression bills are passed, it's going to have a huge economic impact on the state because companies are going to start pulling away. We're seeing this already in Georgia that passed like extreme voter suppression measures, and Major League Baseball has pulled the All-Star game out of Atlanta, and other companies are kind of pushing away from them. And it really is, it's a striking thing that we would go and do this thing that not only is going to hurt democracy, but also hurt our state's economy.
And this is where we are seeing a lot of work in Texas. As you mentioned, Jason, some major corporations have spoken up against the legislation that passed in Georgia. And we're seeing some corporations speak up in Texas already, and it hasn't passed it, which is good because we need them to speak up now so it doesn't pass. But this is where a lot of great organizations are working together to try to continue to call out corporations and say, look, you're doing business in Texas. This is becoming completely undemocratic. Is this the kind of state that you actually want to do business in? We need your voice at the table to stop this legislation from happening. And the reason people are advocating for them to speak up is because we know they have an outsized influence on what our legislators care about, because especially when it comes to our current Republican legislators that are leaders, Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Speaker of the House Dade Phelan, and the like of those, they're all about the economy.
Mm-hmm.
They want to sacrifice grandma's. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said during the height of the pandemic last year, sacrifice grandmothers for the sake of the economy.
Yep.
They live by the economy. Everything's about the economy. Yet they are completely putting a blind eye on it with this type of voter suppression laws that corporations are not going to agree with and are going to potentially take their business out of Texas.
Yep.
So if you're helping those organizations to bring more voices from the corporate sector into this, keep doing that, because we need every voice in Texan at every level to push back against this voter suppression.
Yep. Right. And we should mention this is probably a similar thing too for the anti-trans legislation, that this is a way, this is sure to bring some blowback nationwide in terms of people being less inclined to come here and hold conventions and whatever else that drives a lot of economic activity in the state. Wanted to highlight, we have a number of actions on our site, of course, for pushing back on SB 7 and HB 6. Wanted to highlight also the League of Women Voters Texas has some calls to action as well about it. And they've been very vocal, thankfully, in opposing this and calling it out for what it is. And I wanted to highlight their.
Absolutely. An amazing partner that we work with, and it's across the board. Organizations that you most likely support or that people who support, they're all pushing against SB 7 and HB 6. And so we really need this united front across Texas to make sure that these legislators are aware of this. And a lot of people may feel like, well, if this passes, oh no, all of this work didn't matter. And it's really important to remember that the more Texans you engage right now around this legislation and helping them understand the negative aspects of this legislation, if it does pass, then those same Texans will be motivated to vote these people out.
Yep.
And so we want to stop this legislation from passing. But
yep.
If for whatever unfortunate reason it doesn't, we need as many Texans aware so they are ready to do the work that's needed for 2022 to vote these people out so that we can fix the problems that are being presented during this legislative session.
Yep.
And so your work matters.
Yep. It's not the end of the fight.
Exactly. It will help us win these fights, whether now or at the ballot box. But the most important thing we need to understand is we have to win these fights.
Absolutely.
We have to do the work to make sure Texans are engaged.
Yep. Yep. What Alex said. One last note on this, again, from League of Women Voters Texas. They were really explicit. I appreciated this in calling out that SB 7. I mean, the impact is really, it's going to impact everybody, but it does disproportionately impact Black and Hispanic communities. Election judges can be intimidated. Voters can be intimidated by whatever poll watchers show up, who could go around and watch what anybody's doing and take videos and pictures of it. I mean, how intimidating would that be, right? And in that spirit, in the last week, there was video that surfaced that of one Texas GOP official calling for an army of volunteers to monitor polls. So they're putting this law into place, and the Texas GOP is actively trying to gin up a whole host of people who are going to go into polls in the next election and be looking over everybody's shoulder, which is essentially voter intimidation, but would be made legal by this bill.
Yeah, and you really have to think about the communities, like the Latino community who may need assistance with translation services. That English is not their first language. We know there's Texans in the Asian community and other communities that may need this kind of assistance so that they can ask clarifying questions, that they can make sure they're using the device properly, or they're making sure that they're putting their ballot in through the scanner properly and things like that. And so these translation services will require the assistance of somebody else within that polling place. And so this is really a way to try to intimidate those Texans that are able to vote but need some assistance and want to ask those clarifying questions, that someone's going to put a camera in front of them to start intimidating them for simply wanting assistance. Mm-hmm. That's not the kind of democracy we want. We want democracy that is able to help provide everyone the assistance they need to cast their vote so they can participate. And this is just clear example of one of the ways this army of poll watchers are going to be used to try to intimidate different segments of our population.
Yep. Absolutely. Switching gears slightly, although it is a related note, the census was so botched that it's taking a long time to get the data out to the states. And this is already, we initially thought that redistricting and whatnot was going to be one of the big issues in this session. And because the census data has been so delayed, we're not supposed to see it for Texas until, I believe, September or end of September, maybe. So, there'll almost clearly be special sessions to do redistricting later. We don't even know when the primaries are going to be next year for elections. So there was a bill that came through this last week about trying to set up new dates for primaries. So this is going to be another point of confusion as we're going into next year's election season. And we just wanted to highlight it. If these maps are adopted, we're looking at some primaries that are somewhere between March 1st and May 24th of next year, based on how long it takes to get to redistricting maps.
Yeah, and this is actually really important that this gets addressed now, because while we're hoping for that census data to be available this fall, we don't know how screwed up the data is. Yeah. Because of how horrendous a job it was. And so the redistricting process is going to require a special session. We're going to need Texans involved during that time. But it's going to be really important for people who are considering running for office to represent their community, that they actually know what district they're going to be in, because this is what can change. And so I think this is really important for people to know that these are the kind of steps that we need to take based on the unfortunate, like you said, Jason, the unfortunate handling of the census.
Yep. Something to keep in mind going forward. In case it sounds like we're hammering exclusively on the Texas GOP, I just wanted to highlight this disappointment from Texas Senate Democrats. There was a bill, SB 4, that was being pushed by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick that required the national anthem to be played at all sporting events. This was in response to Mark Cuban saying he wasn't going to be playing it at Mavericks games anymore. And so, we have a lot of issues facing our state, right? And this is the thing that we're spending time on, whether the national anthem gets played at these sporting events or not. And I was really disappointed to see that the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate went along with this charade. There were two who voted against it: Sarah Eckhart from here in Travis County and Nathan Robinson from Dallas. But everybody else just kind of folded and went along with this, which effectively endorses this as an issue of concern. That and we were talking a little bit before getting on about just how nice it would be to see Texas Democrats have a bit more of a spine about what's going on in the legislature here.
Yeah, and a lot of people may ask, you guys say you're a nonpartisan organization, but there is a lot of pushback on the GOP and Republican leadership. And the main reason is because the Republican leadership is there.
Control everything.
Yeah, the governor's Republican, lieutenant governor's Republican, Speaker of the House is Republican, the Senate has a Republican majority, and so they're the ones who are leading a lot of the direction with legislation. And when it's bad, we call it out, and they happen to be there. But to your point, Jason, our nonpartisanship is in the spirit of we will call out anybody, because anybody who is negatively impacting the progress that we need in Texas for that better and brighter future in Texas, or does things like this where they support a bill that gives legitimacy to this issue, which is not an issue, and distracts us from the work that we need to do. We don't care what party you're a part of. We need better elected officials. We need better public servants that are solving the problems that we need solved within our communities and within our state. And so big call out to Texas Senate Democrats. SB 7 passed your chamber. We need you doing a lot more work in helping getting Texans involved to stop legislation, the horrendous legislation that is being passed right now. Your vote in this is really not needed.
Yep, absolutely. And if anything, this could have been an opportunity to draw out an issue that was important to Dan Patrick and like suck up some time in this in the Senate that is going to be spent doing other terrible things. So, in our continuing watch on indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton, he is once again being sued by a bunch of people who he has improperly blocked on Twitter. We should note that Indivisible Texas Lege has been blocked. I personally have been blocked also. Do you have that badge of honor yet, Alex?
Not yet. I keep trying. I keep trying to tell him to step down, to resign, to actually serve Texans. And he hasn't blocked me yet for that, but it seems to be that's the trend. If you ask him to do his job, he's going to block you.
Yeah.
And so, Indivisible Text Ledge being blocked is a true badge of honor.
Yeah.
And this is really something that we need to get a handle on, because if elected officials are able to find new ways of excluding their constituents from engaging with them. We already know in Texas, there's a lot of issues around elected officials at any level having town halls, being made available. A great example is Ted Cruz's voicemail is always full. There's rarely an opportunity to actually get in contact with staff, considering how many offices he has in Texas. It should be a lot easier, and considering there's almost 30 million Texans in the state. So seeing this kind of trend of continuing to empower elected officials to block constituents whenever they are making their voices heard is something that we don't want to see.
Yep. And is not supposed to be allowed. I mean, they're not supposed to be doing this. There have been rulings on this already. Also, in this news, George P. Bush is seriously considering running against indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton in 2022. So that's good to see. That some Republicans at least are saying enough of this guy and taking action on it. And of course, there is already a Democratic challenger, Joe Jaworski, I believe is his name.
Maybe a whole handful of challengers come 2022 on either side of the aisle against Ken Paxton. And I think that's goal number one, is that Ken Paxton needs to be removed from office. He does not need another term. And so George P. Bush, I'm sure there are going to be things that we disagree with and that we're going to be challenging him on and everything. But if goal number one is to get Ken Paxton out of office, then let's get it done. And then there's going to be challengers, like we said, on the Democratic side of the House. So let's hear from all of these candidates, and let's put our support behind the one who's really going to get Texas the representation that we really need and have not.
Right. And I mean, it's crazy, the level of corruption that's there in our AG office for this state at this point. It's galling to watch. So whoever replaces him, hopefully Democrat or Republican, if we can get away from that kind of corruption, I think it'll be a vast improvement for Texas. Also, in that side of the aisle, we wanted to highlight Texas GOP Chairman Alan West. This week was coming out and saying that Texas had the option of seceding from the U.S. He then, of course, tried to walk this back and pretend like it didn't happen, or that CNN was just somehow gotchaing him. Which wasn't true, right? He said it. And this guy is really, if you haven't been paying attention to him, he's really stoking the fires of the worst part of the Trump base of the Texas GOP here. And
we should really call it for what it is. And what Matt Engel says here is, they're all in this together. Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Speaker of the House Dade Phelan, and Texas GOP Chair Alan West. And how they coordinate and help each other to rally the base or to rally different things is something that is very just, I don't know if there's a word to describe how bad of a feeling it is to see the kind of rhetoric that is being pushed by GOP chairmen. And if this really bothered our governor and really bothered our legislative leaders, we should be hearing a lot more from them around just the horrendous rhetoric and things that Alan West is promoting to happen within Texas.
Yeah, their silence is essentially an endorsement of what he's out there saying.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to note also that there are Republicans out there pushing back. Scott Braddock, who is a journalist, was highlighting this tweet from a Republican who was saying that, who were stepping up to defend CNN in this, because of course the Texas GOP base immediately, once it's CNN, it's just discredited because it's, in their minds, fake news or whatever. So it was nice to see some people stepping up and saying, actually, this is legit. This guy needs to be corrected here.
Yeah, a hit piece is exaggerating things or maybe even having misinformation about a person in the media. And to their point, sharing the facts and sharing proof around GOP Chair Alan West is not a hit piece. It's just sharing the facts and here are the receipts.
Yep.
So that's where, it's great to see that people are able to, fully commit to, like, look, this is the truth.
Absolutely.
And this needs to be understood. Like, what he is doing is really dangerous.
Yep. Couple of last things to highlight here. I believe we have some CTAs on this as well, but there are a whole host of permitless carry bills in the Texas Lege right now, which so this would effectively mean that anybody could walk around with a gun at any point, with the idea that somehow this is going to make us safer? I don't know. Would it make you feel safer, Alex?
Absolutely not. And
Either.
unfortunately, we're already seeing stories of gun violence happening now that more people are starting to get out there in the
Yep.
open. And this is just an unfortunate thing to before the pandemic to have so much gun violence in
Yep.
our country and within Texas. And now to go through this pandemic and on the other side of this pandemic to walk into more gun violence
Yep.
is just something our communities and nobody needs in our state. And
Mhm.
so having this constitutional carry, um, you know, become the standard in Texas would unfortunately, we know that it's going to cause more harm.
Right. And we should highlight that this week there was a mass shooting in Bryan where one person was killed and I think 4 or 5 injured as well. So this has real consequences and will cost lives. Our last one, we just
One,
coming
one,
back.
one quick note on that,
Yeah.
Jason, just to add, and we've seen this rhetoric as well around this, is that how Texas is so committed to making it easier to carry a gun versus to vote.
Yeah. Right.
And, no restrictions on gun carrying. We need to make it as easy as possible. But then when it comes to voting, we're going to do everything we can to try to stop people from voting or to make it harder, inconvenient, and to suppress the vote. And just for people to kind of know that distinction is happening within the Republican leadership in Texas right now.
Yep. Yep. I think that's a really important point. Where the priorities are in terms of citizen rights. And our last bit, just wanted to come back to Winter Storm Uri, which feels like it needs to be a continuing issue until we get some real reform. And we had this kind of ridiculous thing this week that ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, who was the one making the decisions about where the grid was going to get shut down, and is this strange semi-governmental, semi-private entity set up in this bizarre deregulation scheme that has defined the Texas energy grid. There've been a bunch of lawsuits filed against it. They're arguing that they're immune from lawsuits because they're a governmental entity, even though they're really a private entity, according to everybody else. And it's just it's sort of highlighting, I think, how confused the system is that we use to run our grid, and how little space it leaves for accountability to citizens.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to really think that we live in a country where a president can be impeached and potentially voted out of, removed from office, but the Electric Reliability Council of Texas cannot have lawsuits brought against,
Yeah.
and that it's definitely different types of accountability, different reasons for that accountability, but it's under the umbrella of accountability. We should be able to hold anybody accountable within the state of Texas, within our country, if they have contributed to suffering. And in this case, Texas Tribune is really understating when they say dozens of people, because it's been hundreds of people that died during the Texas storm, during the Texas freeze.
Okay.
And this is one of the things that we've been partnering with Public Citizen and a whole host of allies around the Texas freeze. And if you go to our Facebook page, you're going to see daily posts from us around it, so that there's content that you can share around the inadequacies of our electric grid, around the facts of what caused the Texas freeze to happen. And so we're using the hashtag Texas Blackout, Texas Freeze, Texas Power Fell, Abbott Blackout, Texas Energy, and Texas Ledge. So if you want to help contribute and spread the word around this, so that there is real accountability and that we continue to make Texans aware of what needs to be done for there to be real change with our electric grid, follow our content. Public Citizen is doing a great job in Texas, helping lead the efforts around this. And so this is something that we highly encourage you to help as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I've got today, Alex.
Well, Jason, the news, it's a lot. and it's by design, like we said at the beginning. The Texas legislature, for whatever reason, feels like they need to cram everything within this short amount of time versus having a longer legislative session or meeting annually so that they have annual legislative sessions. And
Yep.
so this is where we really need Texans to stay up to date, to be involved. And going back to our website, I'm going to highlight really quick so that you are aware of the actions that you can take. And so make sure that you are visiting our website, indivisible.textledge.org. If you have not signed up for our newsletter, you can sign up for it on our website. There's also a link in our post. Get our weekly newsletter. We may actually have a couple of extra newsletters as we get through the rest of this session to make sure you're up to date. But we really need people taking action. And the way you can help spread action with these actions or from our partners is to establish a rapid response 5. So these are 5 people that you can reach out to that will take action because you've asked them. And that way there are more Texans being involved. And I know with my rapid response 5, these are close friends and family members that may not be quite as plugged in, but I know that they will take action. And it's great for them as well because they give great feedback and saying, wow, I didn't know this was happening in the ledge session. I didn't know that this was a problem, number one, and I didn't know they're trying to make it worse. Or I didn't know that this is something we could solve. So this is good legislation that I want to help support. And so it's really helping us inform each other and educate each other. So make sure you have your rapid response 5 so that they are participating. We really need every Texan taking action.
Yep, absolutely. And I think we should also say that even if it feels overwhelming to take action on everything, like just pick some and do it. Like even if you can't do it all,
Yeah.
like just pick 1 or 2 and get in the habit of doing one of those a day or whatever.
Yeah. Healthcare is your priority.
Yep.
Education is your priority. Democracy is your priority. Pick an issue. We have several issues. We have partners that also cover various issues. Pick that spot that you are going to, be motivated to take action. And the key is to then take action because sharing the information on Facebook, watching this live stream is great, but it's all this work is so that you will actually take action and call your representative, call your senator, show up for testimony if you're able to. This is why all this work is being done, so that the end of that is for you to take action. We need that to actually happen, though.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, Jason. Well, it's another way of enjoying our weekend, I guess. We'll keep paying attention to what's happening in the ledge, and we'll be with all of you again throughout this ledge session. So stay tuned, and thanks so much. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Bye, y'all.